My neighbor didn't just welcome me to the neighborhood the day I moved in. She discovered my secret $13 million inheritance and decided it was her civic duty to tell me how to spend it. My name is Liam. I'm 32, a graphic designer who up until recently lived a life that could best be described as aggressively average. I worked from home, paid my rent on time, and my biggest financial decision was whether to splurge on the artisanal coffee beans. That all changed when my grandmother, a woman I'd met a grand total of 4 times, passed away and left me her entire modern art collection. Suddenly, I was the bewildered custodian of canvases by names I could barely pronounce, names that apparently translated to a net worth that felt more like a typo than a reality. After a messy breakup, I decided to use a small portion of my newfound, and deeply uncomfortable, wealth to buy a house, a real house, with a mortgage and everything. I wanted a fresh start, a place to put down roots. I chose a historic row house in a charming, tight-knit neighborhood in Philadelphia. The kind of place with old trees, a sense of history, and neighbors who supposedly looked out for each other. I craved that sense of community. I would come to regret that. My neighbor, the one who appointed herself my financial advisor, is Karen. She's in her 50s, a whirlwind of boundless energy and unsolicited opinions. The undisputed queen bee of the Neighborhood Improvement Committee. She's the type of person who knows everyone's business and isn't shy about making it her own. Her pride in the neighborhood is fierce, almost militant. She loves the community so much she's willing to suffocate it with her good intentions. The air in Philadelphia that August day was thick enough to chew. It was a sweltering, soupy misery, and the simple act of moving boxes from a truck to my new house felt like a Herculean task. My movers, Sal and a kid who looked about 19 and profoundly regretting his life choices, were navigating a particularly large, plastic-shrouded object through the narrow doorway of my row house. "Easy. Watch the frame," I mumbled, my heart thumping a nervous rhythm against my ribs. This was the last piece. The biggest. The most valuable. That's when she appeared. A blur of floral print capris and orthopedic sandals, with a small, yapping dog that seemed to be powered by pure, uncut anxiety. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she boomed, her voice echoing down the quiet, tree-lined street. "I'm Karen, from 2 doors down. We are just so thrilled to have some new blood on the block." I summoned a weak, sweat-drenched smile. "Liam, nice to meet you." Her eyes, sharp and quick, bypassed me entirely and locked onto the large, mysterious object being carefully maneuvered into my living room. "Ooh, what's that? One of those fancy new smart TVs?" "Something like that," I said, hoping my vagueness would be a deterrent. It was not. My grandmother, a woman whose primary personality trait seemed to be an extreme, almost paranoid, privacy, had instilled in me a deep-seated desire to fly under the radar. A desire that was about to be spectacularly thwarted. As Sal and the kid finally wrestled the piece inside, I made a grateful escape from the oppressive heat. But Karen, I was quickly learning, did not recognize social cues like, say, a closed door. She followed me right in, her little dog yapping at the heels of my movers. "Wow, this place has great bones," she announced, her gaze sweeping over the empty rooms with the critical eye of a building inspector. "It'll need a little love. Of course, we've all been saying for years that old Mr. Hemlock let it go. The wiring is a complete nightmare, you know. He was always blowing a fuse, bless his heart." "I'll keep that in mind," I said, trying to subtly herd her back toward the open doorway. But her attention had been snagged. She was staring at the other plastic-wrapped rectangles leaning against the far wall, the smaller pieces that had already been brought in. The plastic on one had torn, revealing a tantalizing sliver of vibrant, abstract color. Karen's eyes narrowed. She took a step closer, her head cocked to the side like a curious bird. "That's not a TV. Just some art," I said, my voice coming out a little too tight. "Art," she repeated, the word hanging in the thick, humid air. She walked over to the torn piece, and before I could even think to protest, she hooked a finger under the plastic and ripped it further open. The revealed image was a stunning, chaotic swirl of blues and greens, a piece by a mid-century abstract expressionist, whose name I was still struggling to pronounce. It was beautiful. It was also worth more than my college education. Karen stared at it, her mouth hanging slightly open. She moved to the next one, and then the next, a dawning, almost feverish excitement in her eyes. It was like watching a prospector strike gold. "My God," she finally breathed, her hand flying to her chest in a gesture of theatrical shock. She looked from the paintings to me, her eyes wide with a potent cocktail of awe and something else, something I couldn't quite identify at the time but would later come to know as opportunity. This is real, isn't it? This is valuable." I didn't say a word. The silence was my confession. "You're the one," she whispered, as if piecing together a grand conspiracy. "The one who inherited the Beaumont collection." A chill went down my spine despite the oppressive heat. "How could you possibly know that?" Karen let out a short, sharp laugh. "Oh, honey, don't be coy. My cousin is a paralegal at the law firm that handled your grandmother's estate. The entire office was buzzing about it for weeks. The mystery heir who got all the art. We just didn't know who you were, or that you were moving right here, onto our block." She looked at the paintings again, her expression shifting from awe to a kind of calculating appraisal. Her gaze was no longer that of an art lover, but of an accountant. "This is a sign," she said, her voice filled with a sudden, fervent conviction. "It has to be." "A sign of what?" I asked, a knot of pure dread tightening in my gut. "A sign that our little neighborhood is finally going to get the help it so desperately needs," she declared, her eyes shining with the light of a true believer. She gestured expansively, as if to encompass the entire neighborhood in her embrace. "We've been trying to raise money for years. Bake sales, car washes, a GoFundMe, all just to fix the sidewalks, to get new streetlights, to repair the wall of the community garden. It's never enough." She took a step toward me, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if we were partners in a grand and noble scheme. "But this changes everything. A few of these paintings, just one or two of the small ones, could pay for all of it, with plenty to spare." I stared at her, dumbfounded. My brain struggled to process the sheer, unadulterated audacity of her suggestion. Was she seriously, genuinely proposing that I sell off my private inheritance to fund her neighborhood pet projects? "Karen," I began, trying to keep my voice from betraying the panic that was beginning to set in. "I just got here. I haven't even unpacked a single box." "And what a welcome to the neighborhood this will be," she plowed on, completely steamrolling my feeble protest. "Imagine it, Liam. The new guy, the one who swoops in and saves the day. You'll be a local hero." She clapped her hands together. A broad, triumphant smile plastered across her face. "We need to call a meeting of the Neighborhood Improvement Committee. Tonight, you can tell us all about the collection, and we can start making a list of the most pressing repairs." She had already whipped out her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen as she presumably summoned her disciples. I stood there, rooted to the spot, a feeling of surreal horror washing over me. The heat, the exhaustion, the stress of the move, it all evaporated, replaced by a single, terrifying thought. I had just moved into a neighborhood with a woman who viewed my inheritance as a community slush fund, and she was not going to take no for an answer. The walls of my new home, which were supposed to be my sanctuary, suddenly felt like they were closing in. My fresh start had just crash-landed and burst into flames. For a long, suspended moment, my mind was just white noise. The sheer, unmitigated gall of the woman was like a stun grenade had gone off in my living room. She had, in the span of a single conversation, welcomed me, invaded my privacy, and then laid out a detailed financial plan for my assets. My fight-or-flight response was doing a frantic, confused tango. "Karen," I finally managed to say, my voice a dry, cracking thing. I cleared my throat and tried again, aiming for a tone of calm, adult rationality that I was very far from feeling. "I appreciate your enthusiasm for the neighborhood, but this is all happening a little fast. These paintings were my grandmother's. I haven't even had a chance to properly catalog them, let alone decide what I'm going to do with them." She waved a dismissive hand, her eyes still glued to her phone, her thumbs a blur of self-important activity. "Oh, don't you worry about any of that, Liam. We can help. I'm sure there are people in the neighborhood who know about art. We have a retired history professor, a woman who does estate sales. We'll get it all sorted out. It was then I realized her strategy. She was creating a narrative, a community-driven tidal wave of expectation, and I was about to be swept out to sea in it. I had to drop an anchor, and fast. "No," I said. The word was louder and sharper than I intended, and it cut through, her stream of chatter like a knife. Karen's thumbs froze mid-text. She looked up at me, her chipper smile faltering for the very first time. "No?" she repeated, as if the word were a foreign concept. "No," I said again, feeling a surprising surge of adrenaline. "This is my property. It is private, and it is not for sale." A flicker of something, annoyance, disbelief, crossed her face before it was quickly replaced by a mask of patronizing sympathy. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension that makes your teeth ache. "I understand. It's a lot to take in. You're young. You probably don't know the first thing about managing this kind of asset." She took a step closer, lowering her voice as if she were imparting some ancient, secret wisdom. "But you have a responsibility, Liam. A responsibility to the community. You can't just sit on a gold mine like this when there's so much good that could be done right outside your front door." The word responsibility hit me like a punch to the gut. I did feel a sense of responsibility, but it was to my grandmother, to the memory of this enigmatic woman who had entrusted me with this incredible, overwhelming legacy. My responsibility was not to Karen and her cracked sidewalks. My responsibility, I said, my voice low and steady, is to honor my grandmother's wishes. And I can assure you, her wish was not to fund the repaving of a street in a neighborhood she never once set foot in. I saw a flash of anger in her eyes, raw and real, but she quickly papered it over with a sigh of long-suffering patience. "You're just not seeing the big picture, Liam. But you will. Once you've had some time to settle in, to see how much our little community needs this, you'll come around." She gave me a tight, bright smile that didn't come close to reaching her eyes. "I'll let you get back to your unpacking, but we'll be in touch. The committee is very, very excited to meet you." And with that, she turned on her heel and bustled out of my house, her yappy dog trotting obediently behind her. The moment the door clicked shut, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My hands were shaking. I felt like I had just survived a natural disaster in human form. The rest of the day was a blur of paranoia. Every creak of the floorboard sent a jolt of anxiety through me. I found myself peering out the window every time I heard a voice on the sidewalk, half expecting to see a torch-wielding mob of concerned citizens. My new home, my supposed sanctuary, felt violated before I'd even spent a single night in it. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called my ex, Mark. "You are not going to believe the day I've had," I said, the moment he picked up. I recounted the entire surreal story. The move, the nosy neighbor, the casual demand that I liquidate my inheritance for public works. To his credit, he didn't laugh. He listened patiently, and when I was done, there was a long pause. "You need to shut this down, Liam," he said, his voice serious. "Hard. People like that, they see a vacuum and they fill it. You have a tendency to be a pushover. Don't let her walk all over you." He was right. Avoiding confrontation was my default setting. It was one of the many reasons we'd broken up. He'd once called it a fatal lack of a spine, hearing. His words now, in this context, stung. But it also galvanized me. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I made a pot of strong coffee, sat down at my laptop, and began to formulate a counteroffensive. I researched art appraisers, high-security storage facilities, and insurance companies that specialized in fine art. I also delved into local property rights, ordinances regarding harassment, and the legal standing, or lack thereof, of self-appointed neighborhood committees. By noon, I had a two-pronged plan of attack. Step 1. Operation Get the Art the Hell Out of My House. I found a climate-controlled Fort Knox-esque storage facility across town and arranged for a discreet professional art handling service to come and transport the entire collection the very next day. The cost was astronomical, but the peace of mind would be priceless. Step 2. Operation Deal with Hurricane Karen. I knew I couldn't just ignore her. That would only embolden her. I had to meet her head-on, but on my own terms. I found the email address for the Neighborhood Improvement Committee on their surprisingly slick website, complete with a prominent donate button, and drafted a carefully worded message. I was polite but firm, professional but unyielding. I stated, in no uncertain terms, that I was not interested in selling the art, that it was a private family matter, and that I would not be attending any meetings to discuss it. I wished them the best of luck with their fundraising efforts and signed off. I hovered my cursor over the send button for a long moment, a feeling of deep trepidation washing over me. But then I clicked it. A sense of empowerment, cool and clean, followed. I was no longer the overwhelmed, intimidated new kid on the block. I was the guardian of the Beaumont collection, and the battle for my quiet life had just begun. The email was, as I'd suspected, like tossing a lit match into a barrel of gunpowder. The explosion wasn't immediate, but the heat came on fast. For a full day, there was only a tense, unnerving silence. It was the kind of quiet that makes you check your inbox every 5 minutes, the digital equivalent of holding your breath. In that brief window of peace, the art handlers arrived. They were like ghosts in white gloves, their professionalism a stark, welcome contrast to the chaotic amateurism of my move-in day. They moved with a quiet reverence, wrapping each piece with a care that soothed my frayed nerves. As the last canvas was loaded into the unmarked van and driven away, a profound sense of relief washed over me. My grandmother's legacy was finally safe. I, however, was not. The first salvo came in the form of an email reply. It was from Karen, of course, but she had CC'd what looked like the entire neighborhood email listserv. "Dear neighbors," it began, the tone deceptively sweet, like arsenic laced with saccharine. "I wanted to share a wonderful update on the potential windfall for our community that I mentioned yesterday. I had a lovely chat with our new neighbor, Liam, the heir to the Beaumont art collection. While he seems a little overwhelmed at the moment, and who can blame him, bless his heart, I'm confident that with a little encouragement from all of us, he'll see the incredible opportunity he has to make a real, lasting difference right here on our very own streets." She then proceeded to detail, in excruciatingly optimistic terms, all the things they could fix with my money. The cracked sidewalks became treacherous pedestrian hazards. The flickering streetlights were a public safety crisis in the making. The crumbling community garden wall was a tragedy for our children's horticultural education. She painted a grim picture of a neighborhood on the verge of collapse, with me cast as the selfish, Scrooge-like figure perched atop my pile of gold, refusing to lend a hand. The email ended with a chilling call to action. "Let's all make a point of introducing ourselves to Liam and showing him what a warm, welcoming, and deserving community he's joined. A little neighborly persuasion can go a long way." And so it began. The neighborly persuasion. It started subtly. A few overly friendly hellos when I dared to venture out to check my mail. A woman I'd never seen before left a Tupperware container of what she called welcome brownies on my doorstep with a small handwritten note attached. "We're all so excited for you to get involved." The brownies, I noted with a grim sense of irony, were as hard as bricks. Then, it escalated. A man cornered me as I was taking out my trash, launching into a long, rambling monologue about how his wife had tripped on a raised bit of sidewalk last spring and sprained her ankle. He looked at me pointedly throughout the story. "A real shame there's no money in the budget to fix it," he concluded, his gaze lingering on me. Another neighbor, a woman with a perpetually worried expression, flagged me down as I was walking to the corner store. She wanted to talk about the lighting. "It gets so dark on this block at night," she whispered, clutching her purse as if fending off imaginary muggers. "It just doesn't feel safe. A young man like you, with so much... well, you should understand the importance of security." It was a coordinated campaign of guilt and psychological warfare, orchestrated by General Karen. She was turning the neighborhood against me, casting me as the villain in her community theater production. They weren't my neighbors. They were her foot soldiers, and I was the enemy encampment. The most unnerving encounter came a few days later. I was working at my dining room table when I saw a movement out of the corner of my eye. I looked up to see Karen standing on my front steps, flanked by 2 other people, a man and a woman, both holding clipboards. They were peering intently into my living room window. I threw the door open, my heart pounding with a fresh surge of anger. "What do you think you're doing?" Karen didn't even have the grace to look embarrassed. "Liam, just the man we wanted to see. This is George, he's a retired contractor, and this is Mary, she's on the Historical Commission. We were just doing a preliminary assessment of the most urgent repairs needed for the block. We figured we'd start with your facade. The pointing on your brickwork is a real mess." "You are not assessing my house," I said through gritted teeth. "And you are not to come onto my property without my permission." George, a burly man with a face like a weathered road map, actually had the nerve to scoff. "Just trying to help you out, son. A house like this, you let the little things go, you'll have big problems down the line." "That's my problem, not yours," I shot back. "And it is certainly not the concern of the Neighborhood Improvement Committee." I looked directly at Karen, my patience finally, irrevocably gone. "I sent you an email. I was very clear. The art is not for sale, and this harassment has to stop." The word harassment seemed to finally pierce her thick hide of self-righteousness. Her face hardened, the folksy charm evaporating to reveal the steel beneath. "It's not harassment, Liam. It's community engagement. Something you clearly don't understand. We're a family on this block. We look out for each other. You can't just move in here with your millions and expect to live in a vacuum." "My millions?" I said, letting out a humorless laugh. "I don't have millions. I have a collection of paintings that I am trying to preserve. What I do have is a mortgage on this house, just like everyone else." "A technicality," Karen sniffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "You could have millions if you weren't so selfish." The accusation hung in the air between us, thick and ugly. The three of them stood there on my steps, a tribunal of suburban justice, their clipboards like stone tablets, their judgment already passed. I was no longer just the uncooperative new guy. I was selfish. I was the enemy. I slammed the door in their faces, my hands shaking with a rage that felt cold and clean. I leaned against the wood, listening as their indignant muttering faded away down the street. The sense of violation was overwhelming. This wasn't just about the art anymore. It was about my home, my privacy, my right to exist without being constantly judged and pressured by a committee of self-appointed moral guardians. The battle lines had been drawn, not just in an email, but on my own front porch, and I had the sinking feeling that the fallout was far from over. The weeks that followed were a cold war fought across property lines and in the coded, passive-aggressive language of the neighborhood Facebook group. My name was never explicitly mentioned, but I was the ghost haunting every post. A picture of a newly formed pothole would appear with the caption, "If only someone had the resources to help us fix our crumbling streets." Community first. A blurry photo of a dark stretch of sidewalk would be accompanied by a lament about public safety and the importance of looking out for one another. I had become a local cryptid, the selfish millionaire of Philly. I retreated into my house, which now felt less like a home and more like a fortress under siege. I left only when absolutely necessary, my shoulders tensed, my gaze fixed firmly on the ground. The charming, tight-knit community I had so eagerly sought had revealed itself to be a cabal of busybodies, and my dream of a fresh start felt like a cruel, expensive joke. The joy and wonder I had initially felt about my grandmother's incredible gift had been curdled by resentment and anxiety. I started to hate the paintings, or at least what they now represented, a glowing target on my back. Mark, my ex, called again. "So, have you sold the art and repaved the entire eastern seaboard yet?" he asked, his signature sarcasm a welcome antidote to the cloying sweetness of my neighbors. "Haha," I said glumly. "I've become a pariah. I think they're planning to leave flaming bags of dog poop on my porch." "Let them," he said, his tone turning serious. "Liam, you can't let them win. You can't let them make you feel guilty for something that is yours. What are you going to do?" I didn't have an answer. My initial plan, secure the art, set a boundary, had been a purely defensive maneuver. It hadn't solved the underlying problem. I was still living in enemy territory. I couldn't stay here, not like this. But the thought of moving again, of admitting defeat and letting Karen and her committee drive me out, was galling. The turning point came from the most unexpected of sources. I received a letter. A real, physical letter. In a heavy, cream-colored envelope, addressed to me in an elegant, spidery script. It was from a woman named Eleanor Vance, who lived at the far end of the block. I had seen her a few times, a stately, white-haired woman who always offered a polite, if distant, nod. "Dear Mr. Henderson," the letter began, "I feel I owe you an apology on behalf of the more sane residents of this neighborhood. I have been privy to the campaign led by Karen, and I am appalled. Please do not judge all of us by her frankly thuggish behavior. Some of us still believe in privacy and common decency." She went on to explain that she had known old Mr. Hemlock, the previous owner of my house, for 40 years. She also mentioned that she had been an original member of the Neighborhood Improvement Committee, but had resigned 2 years prior. "Karen means well," she wrote, "but her passion has curdled into a kind of benevolent tyranny. She sees the world in terms of projects and fundraising goals, not people. She has forgotten that a community is built on mutual respect, not on guilt and public shaming." She ended the letter with an invitation. "I am a great admirer of your grandmother's collection. I followed her acquisitions for years in the art journals. If you would ever be willing, I would be honored to simply see the pieces, not to appraise them, not to suggest you sell them, but simply to appreciate them as they were meant to be appreciated." Her letter was a lifeline. It was a powerful reminder that the entire neighborhood wasn't a monolith of Karen clones. There were sane, reasonable people here. I had just been too besieged to see them. I took a deep breath and did something that felt both terrifying and liberating. I decided to fight back, not with anger and slammed doors, but with a strategy. First, I hired a professional art appraiser, not because I intended to sell, but because I needed to understand the full scope and value of what I was protecting. The numbers were, as I'd suspected, staggering. But the appraiser also gave me something more valuable: context. He told me stories about the artists, about the movements they were a part of, about my grandmother's savvy and discerning eye. He helped me see the collection not as a burden, but as the incredible legacy it was. He reignited the spark of wonder I had lost. Second, I consulted a lawyer who specialized in art law and philanthropy. I explained the entire situation, the relentless pressure from the community, and my own conflicted feelings. I did feel a sense of responsibility, but not the one Karen was trying to impose on me. Together, we came up with a real plan. A month later, I sent another email to the entire neighborhood listserv. This time, however, I wasn't reacting. I was dictating the terms. "Dear neighbors," I wrote, "I'm writing to you today to announce the formation of the Beaumont Grant for Philadelphia Community Arts." I went on to explain that, in honor of my grandmother, I was establishing a charitable foundation. A significant portion of the art collection would be sold over time, with the proceeds used to fund the foundation. The foundation's mission would be to provide grants to small, local arts and culture initiatives throughout the city of Philadelphia, with a particular focus on supporting underserved communities. I detailed that there would be a formal application process and an independent board to review the proposals. Then, I addressed the Neighborhood Improvement Committee directly. I will be making a one-time personal donation of $25,000 to the committee for the specific, itemized purpose of repairing the sidewalks and improving the lighting on our block. This is not a down payment. It is a one-time gift, given in the spirit of neighborliness. My foundation's work will be focused on a city-wide level, and it will not be accepting further proposals from this specific committee. Finally, I ended with a personal note. A community is not built by pressuring its members, but by respecting them. I look forward to a new chapter of mutual respect and the quiet enjoyment of our shared space. The effect was immediate and seismic. I had completely taken away Karen's narrative. I was no longer the selfish villain. I was a philanthropist. I hadn't just said no. I had presented a better, bigger, more generous yes. I had met her demand, but on my own terms, and then expanded the scope of my giving far beyond her limited, parochial vision. Karen was, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine, furious. She had lost control of the story. But most of the other neighbors were thrilled. They got their new sidewalks and their new streetlights, and I got my piece. Eleanor Vance came over for tea, and we talked for hours about art and history. Other, quieter neighbors began to emerge from the woodwork, offering handshakes and genuine, shame-faced smiles. I learned a lot that year. I learned about art and money, about responsibility and boundaries. I learned that a fresh start isn't something you find, but something you have to fight for. My quiet life in my new home wasn't exactly what I had pictured, but it was something better. It was a life I had built myself, on my own terms. And as for the art, it was finally where it belonged, not just as a private legacy, but as a public good, shared with the city that was, finally, starting to feel like home.